Well, I think we'll get cracking now. There might be one or two people who'll join at the end, but welcome everyone. And a particular welcome to James Graham Brown. James is going to talk to us for an hour or so about his fascinating life. As I think all our cricket aficionados here know, he played professional cricket for Kent and then Derbyshire. He then developed a career in teaching and became the head teacher of a school in Truro for some years and then a girls' school in Bath. During that period, he also continued to play cricket at a good level. He played for both Cornwall and Dorset between, I think, 1981 and 1991. And then having completed a very successful career in teaching, James then has become a prolific playwright. He wrote his first play in 1997, I think. Could someone just put themselves on mute, please? We're getting echo. St Still getting echo. And then James has written probably, what, 30 plays since then, something like that. He'll tell us more about those. And then two in particular stand out. The play about Colin Milburn, When the Eye Is Gone, a one-man play, which I think most of us have probably seen. And then Chris Lewis about his the long walk back after his time in prison. So we'll cover that tonight as well. But the themes in his plays are often around tragedy, sadness, and injustice, but they cover many different subjects. So it should be a fascinating evening. And if that wasn't enough, James has also co-wrote Dennis Amos's autobiography. Sorry, we're still getting feedback, please. Could you all put... That's it. Thank you very much. That's great. So, James, sorry, I talked a fair bit about you there. I hope that was a reasonably accurate.
Your sound is gone. I can't.
Yeah. Here we go. I think Matthew very sensibly muted everyone, but hopefully you and I can keep chatting. So I hope that was a reasonable summary of your very active life so far. But I think if I'd be really interested, and I think everyone else would be, about what the life of being a young professional cricketer was like in the 1970s when you started at Kent. I think I'm right in saying that you made your first team debut around the time you completed your degree, and then tell us about the Kent county at that stage. I think under Mike Denness, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. I joined the staff, I think, in Colin Cowdrey's last year as captain, and yeah, when I made my debut, Mike Denness was captain, and he was captain of England as well at that time. It was an extraordinarily exciting time to be on the staff with Kent, because there were so many really, really good players and interesting people. I mean, but I wanted to become a cricketer because in 1961 I went to watch with my granddad. I went to Canterbury and watched Kent play the Australians, and spent 3 days there. It was Benno's Australian side, 61. And Neil Harvey actually captained that particular match. And Colin Cowdrey got 200s in the match. Bill Lawrie said something obscene to me when I sat on the touch line, on the boundary line. But that didn't put me off. But it was watching Colin Cowdrey bat and Graham Mackenzie bowl that persuaded me that this was something I wanted to do. And the atmosphere at Canterbury with the tents and the flags and the flutter and the beautiful weather there. So being at Kent was a dream from that point, and it had to be Kent. And I used to cut out little blue horses and stick them on jumpers and things as a boy. But in the 70s, they had a remarkable number of players, and many internationals, as you know, Brian Luckhurst, Mike Denness, Derek Underwood, Alan Knott, Bobby Woolmer, John Shepherd, Colin Cowdrey himself. The list was endless. And of course, for a young all-round entertainer, not very good at either. Getting into the side was a problem, and I only really played when Test matches were on. But yeah, playing with some really really interesting people, and I think probably the most influential member of that side. There were two really, but the most influential was Bob Woolmer for me because he was the kind of cricketer I wanted to be and never was. And he was also, I think, the kind of man in the cricketing world that I wanted to be, highly imaginative. Um, Also, somebody who always wanted to know how you were, was genuinely interested in other people, wasn't just obsessed with himself. And even when he, in his early 20s, he was always looking to support younger players. And Chris Tavares, Paul Downton, contemporaries of mine, Charlie Rowe, would all say the same thing. We all look at Bobby Woolmer as being an exceptionally, he was a very gifted cricketer. I mean, I think he probably played 19 or 20 times for England. He was a very gifted cricketer, but he was a phenomenal thinker about the game and an innovator. Yeah, and I think his success at Warwickshire as coach and indeed with South Africa is a testament to that. So it's a really interesting time. And then of course there was Cowdrey, Colin Cowdrey, and playing with the heroes, very special. And he was a lovely man. I remember the first time I got 50 for Kent second 11 against Surrey, and I got a phone call in the evening. It was Colin Cowdrey, and you don't expect that, to say well done, and as if why would he know? This young. How would he know it was my first 50 in second 11 county cricket, and why would he be interested? But he was, and that meant a huge amount to me. So those were the two special men, and had wide-ranging interests outside of the game as well. So they were inspirational figures.
Yes, so it was a very good grounding for you, and you played quite a lot of List A cricket as well as some championship games, and they were really a powerhouse team in many ways.
Yeah, the side was built. I mean, it was built by Cowdrey and Les Ames, really, and Les Ames was a man of great wisdom. I mean, he had very humble origins. He came from a traveller's family, in fact, in East Kent. But he was our manager. The days when you had secretaries of county cricket clubs. But he was not just a great cricketer; he was also a great man manager. And I think the thing that really struck with me was when at the end of my first season, which was actually 1971, I think, when I joined the staff, because I'd failed to get into Oxford. I mean, the whole sort of academic ambition for me was to go to Oxford and play with Imran Khan, and play first class cricket in the parks. That was all I wanted to do when I left school. And I didn't get into Oxford. They saw through me. They saw, I think academically I was all right. Probably wasn't a good enough cricketer, but anyway, they didn't accept me, and so I wasn't going to go to university. And I played that season on the staff at Kent with Charles Rowe and Richard Hills and some really wonderful cricketers. And at the end of that season, I think it was second week in August, actually, Les Ames came over. And again, why should somebody who 100 first class hundreds, why would he be interested in me? Except he was my employer, But he came up to me and he said, very candid, the scales fall from your eyes. Son, you're not going to play for England. And I thought, oh, well, cheers, sir. You should go to university. You've got A-levels, haven't you? Yes. Right. And he sorted out an interview with me at Kent University. Somebody, I think, was on the committee. And I went there. And for the first 2 years at university, I didn't miss a game with Kent second 11 because I got time off to go and play. And in fact, on one occasion, my tutor sat and watched me bat while waiting to give me a tutorial. And
Sorry.
the tutorial was longer than my innings, but
Oh.
but there you are. So again, I think we were a wonderfully well managed club by somebody who understood the game, but also understood people and was concerned about our long term development. And I was eternally grateful for that, because if I hadn't gone to university, I think what do you do at 30, 35, or whenever the game ends? there's nothing for you beyond that. I think the Professional Cricketers Association today looks way beyond what players are doing, but in those days they didn't. And Les Ames was in again. He was an innovator. He was somebody who was interested in your whole life, not just in you as a cricketer, in you as a person. Yeah, he was a good man, wonderful man.
Yes. So, what stage in that were you confident that you could be consistently successful as a county cricketer? Because I guess that must be the thing that eats away at every player. When they get to a level, are they going to be good enough? And I'm sure someone like Colin Cowdrey, who was such a brilliant player, of course, he effortlessly did that, but not everyone would have had that ability. And you must have seen some of your colleagues struggling, and when they went down into the second 11, perhaps doubting themselves.
Yes, I mean, in a sense, like so many, it had all begun so well for me. I was I suppose, star is too big a word, but I mean, I played for England under 19s in 1969 and 1970, so I had 2 seasons, which was quite unusual. And I was 69 was the leading wicket taker in the side. I played in the youth test series against the West Indies with people like John Embry and Jeff Miller, so it all augured so well. So you looked to the horizon and there was nothing but stars flashing on the horizon. And then the reality strikes, because so many players at 18, 19 are overtaken by those who have the temperament, which frankly I never had. I always felt a bit of an imposter in the game, and I think I was slightly in awe of these great players who I'd seen on the television, and so I always felt slightly, never as confident as the outward appearance would give. I think I had too many self-doubts, and I don't think I was the only. I mean, there are lots and lots and lots of players. So in the end, I came to realise, I think, particularly when I went to Derbyshire and had long conversations with Eddie Barlow, who was one of the great man of great wisdom, that temperament was far more important than ability. At that level, we were all good, basically good mechanics of the game and techniques in the game at county level. Anyway, you get found out at test level, don't you? But we were all fundamentally pretty good. But then there were those who just had the bottle, the self-belief, the Bothams, who had that enormous self-belief, and a touch of stardust as well. Those sorts of players. But for me, I think it was a fundamental lack of confidence and self-belief, and stupidity, just not learning from the mistakes that you make, making the same ones again.
Well, I think everyone does that at that age, don't they? So, what precipitated your move to Derbyshire?
Well, the desire to play first team cricket, really, and also the arrival. There I was. I'd been around for however many years, 5 or 6 years on the staff, and then all of a sudden, this new influx of young players started arriving. Richard Ellison and Chris Cowdrey, and I looked and I thought, well, I think they're better than I am, and they're younger. So if I was going to pick a side, and when there was a space in the team, who would I pick? Would I pick Ellison, young Cowdrey, or Graham Brown? Well, there wasn't, to my mind, there wasn't much doubt about that. So I think I saw the writing on the wall, and so Derbyshire beckoned. I mean, I made with agreement. I had another couple of years to run on my contract, actually. But Kent were very kind and very, very supportive. So there was no bitterness or no acrimony, whatever. They were very, very supportive. Again, Les Ames and Colin Page, and Brian Luckhurst actually went out of his way to recommend me to other sides. I had three clubs who were interested in signing me, and they were the usual suspects, really. Morgan, Derbyshire, and Gloucestershire. And I chose Derbyshire partly because there was a family connection. My godfather had played for Derbyshire, and my mum's cousin Donald Carr had been, so family connections. So, and I was really glad to go to Derbyshire. It was lovely. I really enjoyed my time there.
You had Eddie Barlow as the captain there, and I think you got to the Benson Hedges Cup final in '78.
We did. Yeah, beaten by Kent. And yes, so Eddie was a remarkable man. I mean, again really interesting. He was coming to the end of his career. I mean, he was coming up for 40, and he captained the side. And we had obviously Bob Taylor, one of the two best wicketkeepers in the world at the time. The other was playing for Kent, and we had Jeff Miller, who we've talked about previously, Peter. You know, a
Mm.
great cricketer and a lovely man, very funny man. Michael Hendrick, fine bowler, wonderful bowler, one of the best medium fast seam bowlers I think England's ever had. Wonderful bowler, and John Wright, of course, and Peter Kirsten. We had a great side, and yeah, and I really enjoyed my time. I was no more successful at Derbyshire than I've been at Kent, I hasten to add. But I loved my time there, and I'm very close to the club, and had a great time. It's a wonderful time to be there, and part of the affection for Derbyshire comes from the fact that they actively wanted me. I've grown up in Kent and gone through the system, so there's a kind of natural conveyor belt progression through into the system and to the club. But Derbyshire actively wanted me to go and play for them, and that was kind of heartwarming. Um, so yeah.
And it would, I mean, they were unlike Kent, who'd swept all before them on several occasions over the previous sort of 10 years or so. Derbyshire had been less successful, I think, hadn't they? And what I also probably a slightly different social dynamic amongst the players.
Very different. Yes, I mean a lot of the Kent side have been independently educated, university educated. The Derbyshire side were from a different social background altogether. Made them nonetheless more interesting. Nonetheless, they were a fascinating group of people. Um, Huge wit, very funny, and I love my time. I mean, the wickets were awful. I mean, if you were trying to bat and the ball seemed around all over the place, I couldn't work, and it was always so cold, and the ground was horrible. Um, and I mean, it had been a race course, I got it blew. I've never been so cold. At Derby, pre-season training at Derby it was like being in the SAS. It it was tough, but the people were great and very welcoming, and it was a very happy time.
Yes, and so at the end of 78, your contract was up, presumably, and did you at that point decide that yeah, you take a different route professionally?
Well, I knew the game was up when I mean I think I was caught long off playing for a draw against against Lancashire at Queen's Park, and I walked back and I sort of sensed that the moment might have come to end this. So I retired before they sacked me. So and the then chairman had no made no bones about it when I sort of handed him my notice out. It was a bit like Alec Bedser and Botham, when he gave up the captaincy. Well, we'd have sacked him anyway. It
Mm.
was it, it felt like that. But again, there was absolutely no acrimony. Derbyshire had come for me, and I was very grateful for that. Why should they? I was just an very ordinary cricketer, but they gave me a second chance, which I didn't take. But they offered it to me, and yeah. But then the time was to move on, and I'd also met a Derbyshire girl. Um, so we've been 48 years married, and I saw too many cricketing relationships, the travel and what have you, and the distance
Mm.
apart that had fallen apart, and that wasn't for me really. So I made the choice to get out, and as I say, I think it would have been made for me anyway. But yeah, I wasn't sorry at that point. I wasn't sorry to call it a day on professional cricket.
Well, you've
Uh,
given it your best shot, hadn't you? And stuck at it. I mean, it's a brave choice to go to Derbyshire because for all the reasons you've highlighted, not particularly successful county, the wickets would be challenging more often than not, and many other reasons. I'm sure it was a leap into the unknown, but it obviously you really enjoyed it for all that.
Yeah, I did, and there was every county has its own character, and Derbyshire's kind of shaped out of the Peak District, and there's something craggy and unusual and slightly offbeat about it. But it was lovely. It was great time.
Just before we move on, but for everyone's benefit, James and I had a little chat beforehand, but perhaps you could repeat what you said about Jeff Miller and Mike Hendrick, because that was very interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, traveling. I mean, one of the things we had at Derbyshire was a team bus, which was, we didn't have it for very long because Eddie Barlow got rid of it, thought it was a jolly bad idea. But anyway, traveling on the team bus, I sit behind Miller and Jeff Miller and Mike Hendrick, and they were the funniest pair. And they improvisation of wit and humour. It was just priceless. They had these two sort of elderly northern gentlemen that they played, always sitting watching something in a field or a cricket match or a football match, and they'd have these conversations that they just devised on the spur of the moment. And I felt about both of them, had they not been cricketers, they could have been a comedy duo. They were utterly hilarious. We used to sit and cry laughing at them. They were so amusing. Clever guys, very clever.
Good memories. So we'll move now on to your teaching career, but just for anyone who's recently joined, if you'd like to throw in questions or comments, then do put them on the chat. I didn't mention that when we started, and then I can ask James as we go about those. Alternatively, do feel free to wait till the end, and then there'll be plenty of time to ask questions. But with your English degree, with your cricket career behind you, you embarked on a teaching career, and you had a pretty successful time of it, didn't you, down in Cornwall and then in Bath?
Yeah, well, I had a really happy teaching career. I loved it. I mean, I'd gone to university, read English, and then did an MPhil at Bristol. So literature mattered to me, reading mattered to me, and the sharing of books with young people was an absolute joy. So teaching English was really about teaching literature, and so from Anglo-Saxon times to the present day, and reliving your own passion with young people. What could be a better way of doing that? And also, there's something of the performer in all sportsmen, and there is that as a teacher as well, going into your classroom and being able to shine or perform with a group of young people. That may sound all very egotistical in the kind of way it is, but and I think the best teachers I have seen have that sense of performative style about them, and because the thing is to engage with young people and to inspire and to develop a passion, and if you can share that with them, and so they come away with something for life, then that's absolutely wonderful. And just occasionally, I get letters but it's only occasionally, from people who write I got one the other day actually, who's kind enough to contact me to say that it made a difference in some way. I'm sure writing to everybody taught them, probably wanted money, but anyway, written to say that it made a difference to this person's life, and that means a huge amount. So it's very, very different from, if you like, from sport. There's an element of pleasing yourself because you're doing the things that you love, but you're doing it for a much more socially important reason than playing cricket. Although there is a great social importance in the structure of sport for audiences and for spectators and for members. So to that extent, teaching has a lot in common with that. But yeah, no, I loved the classroom, and the only problem with the teaching profession is that the more successful you are, the further you get removed from the classroom. So if you're a good teacher, they make you head of department, which means you teach a bit less. And if you're a good head of department, then you become a deputy head or an assistant head or something, which means you teach even less. And then if you do that reasonably well and you don't completely cock it up, they make you a head teacher for some extraordinary reason, and then you have the opportunity to really make a mess of it. But yeah, so I had that. That was my progression. But starting late, as I did when I was 30, I suppose, when I kicked off, you have to catch up. And so it felt a bit like I was in a bit of a hurry because those who'd started at 23 were 7 years more experienced, um, and so catching up was an issue. But I think looking back, what sport had given me was a perspective on life, and also an alternative experience that I found really, really useful. Because for me, so many teachers have gone to school, gone to university, and then gone back into school. And I think that is the worst possible preparation, actually, for engaging with young people. To have had something else in your life that gives you that other perspective, I think is really, really important.
And did you, at the schools you taught, were you able to influence the playing of cricket at all? Or were you so busy with being a head teacher or head of English or just teaching English?
Well, I mean, to start with, yes, I coached cricket sides, and that was lovely. I really enjoyed that, and being able to give something of your experience to the. I did that at King's Canterbury. I mean, I taught, I coached the cricket there during the winters, which was really, really enjoyable. I loved that. Yeah, so cricket became an important part. One of the things I did as the extracurricular side, and I think one of the great shames of the educational system post Kenneth Baker in the Thatcher years was the allocation of specific times for teachers to work, which meant they worked those times, and a lot of teachers stopped doing the things that you and I will remember at school that teachers gave their time to. That is so important, because meeting kids out of the classroom, because not every kid is an academic, but meeting them out of the classroom and engaging them in sport or drama or the Duke of Edinburgh Award or walking across Dartmoor or whatever it might be, or going on a trip to Iceland, it doesn't matter, or whatever it might be, or just a trip to the Roman baths, seeing people in another context is really, really important. And that the shrinking of that is one of the things that I worry most about in English education. And I think we'll see the impact of that in sport, that increasingly it will only be the independent sector that produces. It's a real challenge for state schools to play cricket and to play rugby and what have you. A real challenge. Increasingly, we see that going out to the clubs and kids coming through that, or through the independent sector. So I think we have a real challenge there for the cricketing authorities to try and regenerate sport across the spectrum, across the social groups, because we don't want cricket just to be, an educated middle class game. That's not the way it should be. Everybody should be able to play this wonderful game. They do in India, and I think you see go to India, you see everybody playing, and it's not like that here, and it's a real shame.
Yes, I mean, I think it's a vexed subject, isn't it? It really is. And I mean, there's lots of charities like Chance to Shine that are contributing a lot, aren't there, at the moment? And I think you go around the country and you still see a lot of cricket played. But I think when I grew up, probably most people of my generation would probably say if they were keen on cricket, they supported a county. That perhaps doesn't happen in the same way. And clearly, the lack of TV coverage now on terrestrial TV has, I think, had some effect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I've got a photograph of my dad in his 1937, I think it is, school cricket team down there at Harvey Grammar School, state grammar school in Folkestone. Picture of his team, and the school magazine. They played 22 fixtures, against Dover Grammar School and Maidstone Grammar School and some of the independent schools. And my dad was a good cricketer as a consequence of that, and passed it on to his sons, and that was that was what it was like, and that was what it was like in the 50s as well. And I think that has been eroded, and I think that's a great shame. I think it's a real sadness.
Yeah. Well, we're still optimistic about the future, but there's a lot of work to be done, isn't there? And what about your last job? I think was at a girls' school in Bath. Were you able to influence the playing of cricket there, or was it perhaps a generation ago that, or 10 years ago or so more, when perhaps girls' cricket wasn't quite so popular?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. Although I had the great joy of watching Anya Shrubsole bowl because she was at the school over the road from ours, and her dad was head of PE. But no, cricket hadn't taken off in girls' schools at that stage, um, and it was about to. It was about to, and what reason would they not be able to play the game? It's a beautiful game. I think it's a very different game. I've watched the England ladies play a couple of times, and it looks to me to be a very graceful game. It's a less physical game, but it's got its own rhythm and its own drive, and it's very skillful. And it's great to watch. Much the same as you look at the ladies' soccer side. So they play a much more open and attacking, and much in my way, more fluid, more interesting game in many ways. More goals, and the ladies cricket that I see is really improving. I remember playing in, I think it was Derek Underwood's benefit year actually at Hove against England ladies, for a Kent and Sussex team against the England ladies, and Mary Pilling was the fastest bowler in all England. And this is 1972 or something like that, and she was sort of slow medium. How times have changed, you know.
Well, it's amazing what you can do when you get specialist coaching, specialist fitness, and encouragement, really. I mean,
Exactly, and the numbers playing the game,
yeah.
which of course is really important.
Well, I think we've got Raf Nicholson, who's the vice chair of the Cricket Society. She's a real expert on the game, as you probably know, on women's game, and she reckons there's about 150 professional women's cricketers now in the UK. So it's only going to develop further. But I did wonder whether you were just too early in your tenure, really, to be able to. 10 years later, it's very much more of an acceptable and enjoyable thing for girls to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's not so. But I mean, I think when I was talking to Dennis Amos, he was on the ECB at the time. I think it's the early 200s. It might have been the late 1990s when women were admitted to Lords. You know that it's not so very long ago that kind of level of exclusivity, male exclusivity, dominated the game.
Mm.
Yeah.
We'll move on to Dennis Amos. You co-wrote his autobiography, essentially. You know, he was in I think most people's eyes, a dedicated professional, a very good role model, and you know, he had nearly 30 years as a professional cricketer. How did you find him?
Delightful, absolutely delightful. And he was a really interesting man, incredibly humble for a man. I mean, I think he played 50 tests and he averaged 40, quite a bit. I mean, he's got a remarkably good record. And of course, 102 first class hundreds. I mean, he's in that very exclusive club. But what hadn't he done in the game? As you say, he'd started his playing career in the 1950s in a game that was, 32 or 34 first class matches, 32 first class matches a year. He'd started went back in those when there was no one day cricket at all, and then come through to the 80s to play. So he'd seen massive change, and he was very open as well to change. Highly intelligent man, and we met every week in Cheltenham. I would drive up from Bath, and he'd drive down from Brummie, and we'd meet at the Everyman Theatre in Cheltenham and talk for hours and hours and hours. And his stories were legion. And he's a very humble man who'd achieved a huge amount in the game. Not just as a player, but then as an administrator, because as the chief executive at Warwickshire, and he always said, you know, without a single O level to my name, he would say, not a single O level to my name, and there I was, you know, making big budgeting decisions on a test match ground, running one of the biggest cricketing organisations in the country, at the top end of it. And that was on merit. You know, he'd been a great cricketer, he knew the game, but he was also a skillful administrator and a good man manager. And under his leadership, of course, Warwickshire won so many. They won the treble, didn't they? I mean, they were a fantastic side that he built. He brought Bob Woolmer to the club and Brian Lara to the club, and appointed Dermot Reeve captain. He'd made so many great decisions. It was his ability to know who to put in place, and his delegation skills. I think that's, talking to him, he suddenly realised that he was a true leader, and he became vice chairman of the ECB as well, and was part of the organisation that organised Andrew Strauss's highly successful tour to Australia. Was it 2011? Was it when they won the Ashes Down Under? And that was his swan song, and he sort of signed off after that, Dennis.
Signed off on a high then.
Signed off on a high. Yeah. What would we do for that now, hey?
Exactly. I mean, what I remember about him was that he when I first started taking an interest in cricket in 1966, I think he played one game for England that year against the West Indies, and then didn't reappear for several years. And he kind of moved from being a middle order bat to an opener. And there must have been at some point the trigger just changed for him, and he became an outstanding cricketer.
Yeah, there was a moment when he was actually he got dropped by England. It was 60, well, whichever year it was, and he played that one test, as you say, and he was surprised to be selected, but he was ditched, as had Graham Gooch, of course, been another very promising player at the time. But he went back to Warwickshire, and it kind of eroded his confidence. He was struggling to get into the Warwickshire team at one point, and then the opportunity came to open, and I forget who it was who got injured, and he seized that moment, and he persuaded AC Smith to let him open, and the rest is history. He opened for England. He opened, and his career transformed itself. It was. He described it, having the chains taken off him. You know, it was as if he found his place. And the two double centuries he scored against the remarkably wonderful West Indies side are testament to a really great player. People often forget. You know, I think it was the holding Roberts crowd. He got 200 and whatever it was at the Oval when everybody else was falling around the place and having their stumps flattened. And Dennis did that, and he did it again in the West Indies another occasion. You know, he did two double centuries, remarkable.
Yes. I guess the only area he probably failed in or didn't do as well as he might have liked was against Australia, I think, wasn't it?
It was. He got 90, I think, at the MCG in one of that series. But then so many careers were ended, weren't they, by Lillian Thompson? She was a wonderful bowler, wasn't she? And the 74-75 tour. Yeah, I mean, I think he was shell shocked by that, as I think John Edrich was as well, and so many of that side. Of course, England were desperate. They flew Cowdrey out, didn't they? You know, he was 42, I think, when he flew out, and you think to those days when Cowdrey walking out to bat and shaking. Was he trying to shake Dennis Lilly's hand when he in his England cap, you know, to face 90 mile an hour bowling, but pre-helmet days, my goodness me, times have changed. Yeah,
they certainly have. Matthew Stevenson has just put on an interesting point here about saying, did Amos regret signing up for Packer and then getting cold-shouldered in the Warwickshire dressing room?
Well, he regret. Did he regret it? Well, he regretted signing up for South Africa more than he regretted signing up for Packer, actually. He felt that the players that signed for Packer, although they suffered in the short term, actually brought changes that were much needed, and there was a rapprochement between Packer and the Testing County Cricket Board, wasn't the International Cricket Council? But he regretted South Africa more because he went on the tour to South Africa, the Davy Graveney tour, um, and he regretted that before he went because his children started getting sick at school. Um, and on reflection, he felt that it was a betrayal of what he felt he betrayed fellow Warwickshire players, Rowan Canai, Derek Murray, Lance Gibbs, who were his friends. He felt he let them down. So yes, I mean that was, I think, the one that he felt more passionate about, if you like. More, if you were looking for regrets, it was there. Yeah.
No, and of course they were difficult decisions because professional cricketers were paid appallingly. We had a very good talk recently from Mark Peel about Derek Underwood, and he had Derek Underwood signed up with Packer because essentially he was, at the top of his game and he was getting paid very poorly, and he felt that he needed to make a provision for himself.
No, he
So
did, and Deadly was going through a divorce as well at the time. Yeah, and there you have a man 297 Test wickets. One of the great, probably, well, arguably the best left arm spinner England's ever had. And if you're at the absolute pinnacle of anything, you expect there to be some kind of level of remuneration. And he was still driving second-hand cars, Deadly. I mean, it was yeah, and Eddie Barlow, for example, went. I remember the discussions in the Derbyshire dressing room because that's where I was at the time. That everybody knew something was happening because people the telephones kept going, and not the messages, you need to go and bring back so and so, and there were conversations happening on touchline, on the boundary between people. So we knew something was going on, and Eddie went purely and simply because he had been isolated from playing Test cricket, and he wanted to play against the best in the world, and I couldn't blame him for that.
yes, he was also at an advanced stage in his career, wasn't he?
Well,
And
he absolutely was, and yeah, he was, and some of the guys were just doing it to pay off their mortgages, and you can understand that with Packer. I think the South African tour was a different matter.
yeah. Although I think we meet quite a lot of cricketers through the Cricket Society, and they
Oh,
all tend to have a method of saying that they did it so they could pay their mortgage off, whatever the issue might have been. And so, just looking on a financial level, I guess it's a natural thing to do, isn't it? But also these tours are very difficult on a moral basis, I think.
yeah, I mean, I went to South Africa in 1977, 78, the winter thereof, and I worked for John Passmore for the Passmore Trust, and worked in the African township in Langa. That opportunity was there for anyone to go and work there. So I worked there, and I worked in Soweto as well. And what was interesting is Paul Phillipson did it, and I did it, and there were a few others. But there were Eddie Barlow, but there were very, very few of the South African players at the time who took the time and effort to go and support the John Passmore Trust and the development of black cricket. Bob Woolmer did. Um, he was particularly into the support of the Asian game in South Africa. But it was, yeah. So feelings ran high, and it was understandable, I think, the reaction in this country to that at the time.
Just before we move on to your career as a playwright, Elspeth Cokes put a message on saying it was Jeff Thompson that Cowdrey met at the crease and and Cowdrey said, "Good morning, I'm Colin Cowdrey."
Was it? Oh, thank you. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, these things are very, they develop a life of their own, don't they?
They do. Okay, it was Jeff Thompson.
It could, I'm sure Lily probably said the same thing as Jeff Thompson did too, but
And Cowdrey remembers. I think David Lloyd was at the other end, and remembers David Lloyd taking the Thompson for 3 or 4 overs to give him time to acclimatise. It's a lovely thing to do. I mean, who would choose to face Jeff Thompson, eh?
Correct. Yeah. No, you'd be looking for the quickest single you could find.
You certainly
So,
would.
so anyway, you've developed this remarkable career in the last 20 plus years, James, and as a playwright. And uh, we'll talk a little bit about Colin Milburn and Chris Lewis in a moment. But as I think I said in the intro, you focus on people who haven't had it easy necessarily. I think in a lot of your plays, tragedy, sadness, injustice. There's been the odd happy ending, like the Tamworth too, but maybe I'm sure with Chris Lewis there's probably a happy ending, but there
Yes.
certainly wasn't really for poor Colin Cowdrey. Sorry, Colin Milburn. I beg your pardon. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, in a way, the subjects choose themselves, I suppose. I mean, that if you're writing a play, there has to be a drama. You have to have something that is going to engage your audience. So there has to be a journey. And the Colin Milburn story came about through Jason Ratcliffe, really, who approached me. I've written some other plays before that, and Jason had been to see one and contacted me and said he felt that the Professional Cricketers Association ought to do something around the Mind Matters campaign they were putting at the time, because of course there are these dreadful tragedies that happen in cricket, and cricket seems to be particularly damned by mental health issues. And I could talk about that and why I think that is, if you want me to in a bit.
Yes, but, please do.
So when I met with Jason, we talked about, well, how do we get the story across, and what story is it that we're going to tell? And of course, the story that we agreed on was the Colin Milburn story, because it is a Greek tragedy of epic proportions. This larger than life character who seemed to have the world at his feet, the cricketing world at his feet, who had only I think it was the winter before, playing for Western Australia, had played what Bradman described as the greatest innings played on Australian soil by an Englishman. When I think it was 200 and something he got for Western Australia. He seemed to be breaking through in a way that was unfashionable at the time. He broke the mold, the boycott mold, or he had all this exciting equipment. He's a stroke for 3 strokes for every delivery. Charismatic figure, funny, lively, bright, engaging, incredibly popular and well liked. And then, of course, there was this awful incident, as we know the story. So, because of that, the degeneration of his sense of well-being, his mental well-being that happened, and the alcoholism that followed, that destroyed him, really. And there's a lesson for so many cricketers about professional cricketers about preparation for afterwards. What the hell are we going to do with ourselves if this comes to an end? It will come to an end, and of course with Milburn, the tragedy, it came to an end force majeure. He didn't by accident on that dreadful night in that car accident. So the story is tragic, but it is, in my view, hugely dramatic, but has that power, I think, to move people. Milburn's story has the power to move people and perhaps to make them think and modify their views. And it certainly had an impact on some of the young cricketers who came to see it, some of the academy young cricketers who came to see it, and who started to think and ask questions. And we did it all over the country. As you know, I think it was every first class county was involved. It was performed everywhere, and quite a number brought their academy sides, and I went to speak to them afterwards. The Middlesex one was particularly interesting at Lord's. They brought a lot of their academy players along to watch that, and I went and talked to them afterwards. And a significant number of them said they'd never really thought about what they were going to do afterwards, or this can never end, because you live in that kind of bubble. it happening. Um, when you're in the middle of or the beginnings of your career, everything's going to be wonderful unless you've got a Les Ames who tells you it's not. You know, things can go wrong.
And then, in many ways, for Colin Milburn, everything went wrong for him, didn't it? After his, I mean, first of all, the psychological issues must have been enormous to overcome.
Yeah,
The disappointment of not being able to play, and then he did have a brief comeback that didn't work terribly well, not unreasonably, when you only have one eye. And then he that sort you covered, I thought, in the play very well, this idea about the sort of bonhomie of people wanting to be around him, and people that like a drink often circulate around other people who like a drink. And I'm sure that he was a figure that people rather liked to be around, but it can't have helped him hugely.
no, no, he was, yeah, he was a celebrity figure, and people liked, you know, the Abington Arms in Northampton was his favourite haunt, and he was this figure drawn to, and everybody wanted to buy him a drink. And he was. I mean, I met him when he was alive. In fact, played against him, and he was a larger than life figure. Everybody wanted to be with him, particularly the young players. They just thought he was wonderful because he broke the rules. You know, he was a rebel. There was he did he went his own way. He was his own size. He looked very comfortable in his own skin, though, and for a man of that size, although he might not be thought so large today, the shape of the British population has changed since Ollie Milton's day. But he was incredibly nifty on his pins. He was a smart dancer and a great mover. Yeah, but researching the story was great because one of the people I spoke to most was Alan Hodgson, the Northamptonshire fast bowler, who'd been his flatmate and his best friend, and they were very, very close. And the real tragedy, I mean, I spent a lot of time with Alan, who again I played against and knew very well. A lot of time with Alan, who tragically died 3 weeks before the first performance. He had a big heart attack and died, and never saw, because he was. I dedicated the play to him, really.
He was also from the northeast, I think, wasn't he? Yeah,
He was a Geordie boy, yes.
yeah.
He was one of the makers. I think Ken Turner used to bring them down in large numbers. Peter Willey, you know, Cookie. Yeah, the northeast fed Northampton in a way that Northampton didn't seem able to at the time. But yeah, so he was an important part in the research there, and Matthew Engel was absolutely wonderful. I spent a lot of time with Matthew because he, of course, had been on the Northampton Chronicle at the time of Milburn's, the journalist, a bit at the time of Milburn's sporting career, and then his family. I mean, Ollie didn't have any, he'd never married, didn't have any children, but his cousins are still up there and were more than willing to share his archive, such as it is, and his story and their stories about him and his jokes and his humour. So yeah, to try and make it feel authentic, that was lovely. And there's a real responsibility in telling the story, the lives of real people. You have to get it right. It's a huge response, whether they're alive or not. It matters not, because there are people alive to whom they mattered, and a lot of Ollie's friends, a much loved man, and his cousins, they adored him. So and I felt the weight. I really felt the weight of that love for him. You know, when you're writing, you've got to get it right.
Yes, no, that's interesting because one of my questions, which I outlined to you, was how do you draw the line between what happened as opposed to what you might want people to see? It can't, but I mean, I think for me, the Colin Milburn play stuck to the facts very well, and I think it's a familiar story in the sense that everyone knew about it, but the drama was absolutely fantastic in the end.
Well, yes, I mean, partly the actor was wonderful. Not absolutely, Dan Gaysford, wonderful. He's had a glittering career since, actually. Looked nothing like Ollie and was not the size and the shape, but it kind of didn't matter. Yeah. The interesting thing was, actually, for that, I don't know if you've seen the dramatization of body line. The thing that always goes wrong in these things is getting the cricket right. If you're doing, there's an awful film, isn't there, with Sylvester Stallone in goal and Bobby Moore and the footballers as well, and the football's all wrong as well.
Escape to Victory.
That's the one. That's the one. And so we agonised about how are we going to get Ollie to bat, and in the end, it was Norman Graham, the ex Kent fast bowler, who said, "Well, as he said, as a bowler, what used to really, really irritate him was these batsmen in the pub just going, oh, I played that shot there, and I did that one, and then I did that." And actually, all we got Dan to do was we sent him off to one of the professional cricketers. I forget which one actually, down in Hampshire, who just Paul Terry, who played for Hampshire, who spent hours as teaching him to do this and play these shots just for in the pub, and so that's what he did. So we got round the cricket, and I thought that was inspirational. Actually, it was a way of getting the cricket message across, just using your forearm.
Yes, well, that worked out very well. I think if I may just give you a brief anecdote from Escape to Victory, because the Hollywood producers actually wanted it to end with Sylvester Stallone saving a penalty and then dribbling the whole length of the pitch and scoring the winning goal. But even Bobby Moore and Pele and Beckenbauer in the film said, "No, this is ridiculous. It will never ever happen." And eventually they caved in. And but Elspeth Coke has put up a rather good message actually about what we've just been talking about. She compares Colin Milburn to Compton, Botham, and Flintoff. He was Colin Milburn was such a draw, and she says, "I understand that many came to watch him because he was so skillful, such an entertainment." And she referred to Mark Peel, who we mentioned earlier. His book on Milburn is so sad and evocative. So
yeah, it's a great book. Great book.
And then you moved on to in cricket wise, Chris Lewis, and a fabulous and very successful cricketer. Played a lot for England, and he played for a long time, didn't he? And then he obviously spent some time in prison, and you developed this play, I'm sure, alongside him, because he's been involved with you a long time now, hasn't he? But called The Long Way Back.
Yes. And that happened because Jason Ratcliffe had left the Professional Cricketers Association. But it was again he who contacted me and said, would I be interested in writing a play about Chris Lewis? Because Jason had been to visit Chris every month during his 6.5 years in prison. He was actually sentenced to 13 years, but on parole came out 6.5, and that was for smuggling of illegal substances in from St. Lucia. He tried it once, got caught, and that was it. That was the sentence that was handed down to him. I mean, he played for England 85 times, Chris, and I think he was the International Cricketer of the Year in 1992. A wonderful athlete and a really interesting man. In fact, I spoke to him today. I spoke to him very regularly. We got very, very close. But that was different, developing that, because Chris was alive and he came and stayed with me, and we spent a lot of time talking about his story. And he wanted his storytelling because for him, it was also part of his rehabilitation, was telling his story and getting it out, because Chris went everywhere with the show and did a post-show discussion afterwards, and was painfully honest about what he'd done and taking responsibility and owning responsibility for it. And that's what he wanted to do. And the play actually also went into some prisons. We went into Portland prison, and we also went into Aylesford prison, and a couple in London. And there was one moment in Portland, and Matthew Engel was there, actually came to cover it for The Guardian, when at the end of it, Chris had done his post-show discussion where he'd been brutally honest about taking responsibility and saying, far too many of people like me blame the system because I'm a black boy and I'm from a working class background, and what more can you expect of me, etc., etc., etc. And he looked at this group of prisoners and said, you guys, if you're going to change your lives, you've got to own up to what you've done. You've got to be honest with yourselves, and you've got to start talking about what you've done and stop pretending that it's somebody else's fault. It's nobody else's fault. And there was kind of a shattering moment. We thought, God, we're all going to get murdered here. Shut up, Chris. Please be quiet. These guys look pretty heavy. Anyway, they suddenly realised that half of them were in tears, and it was an incredibly poignant moment. And then the week after that, Chris got a whole lot of emails, and one in particular from the mother of this lad who was there to say, "You've changed. I think you've changed my son's life." He'd been denying what he'd done, and everybody else, and he rung home to his mum and told her, said, "This is what I did, and I promise I'll never do it again." So, well, we're still in touch with her, and he came out and has put his life back together. He's now a train driver, and
Good on him.
doing really and so trained. So, and Chris said, if I've changed one person's life, then it's all been worthwhile. So the idea in that play was we came up with, and it was partly Chris's idea, is that he spent a lot of time in isolation because he was an international cricketer, and people wanted to know him for the wrong reasons, and he spent a lot of time talking to himself. So I had this dialogue between, if you like, these two Chris's, if you like, the two sides of him, and that's what the play was about, telling his story, but in a duologue. So I hope it worked. It won a couple of awards, actually. We were very proud of that. But Chris was heavily involved in that, and very important man in my life. Actually, I've learned a lot from Chris Lewis.
And what is he focusing on now? Is he helping people put their lives back together? Is that something essentially he's?
He gives a lot of his time coaching.
Yeah.
A lot of his time to young cricketers. He's also starting. He started his own business. He's also he's actually in Guyana at the moment, so he's starting a business in Guyana, where he does a lot for young cricketers there. He's a seriously good man. He's a fine man. I'm really pleased I met him. And he's done a lot, and his story was definitely part of his own, as I say, rehabilitation. At the end of it, he felt it was time to move on from that. He'd done it. He got it out there.
Yeah, well, it must have been very cathartic for him.
Yeah,
yeah,
it was.
and
Yeah,
he's a very good example of someone who's shown tremendous determination to continue his life in a positive way, which is great. Must be a great thing to see from your point of view.
yeah,
And
it absolutely is. Yes.
And you generally choose you've written quite a lot of plays about football as well, which a number of the audience here I'm sure would be very interested. We talked a little bit about the Walter Tull one, which was publicised to the members earlier this year, and then you had a focus around Laurie Cunningham. You wrote a play about him, and then also the 3 Degrees about Cyril Regis, Brendan Batson, and Laurie Cunningham as one. And
Yeah.
so you've dealt with some really interesting subjects. You wrote one about Johnny Wilkinson, I think, as well. And
Yeah, hands up for Johnny Wilkinson's right boot. Yes, that was
yeah,
that was commissioned by the Rugby Football Union for the 2015 World Cup, and it went to all. I think they played. The World Cup was staged in the UK, and I think they played at 13 different cities, Newcastle to Exeter, and and it was performed in each of those cities when there were matches going on. So it toured around, and it did very well. Johnny Wilkinson came to watch that, to see if the actor looked anything like him, which of course he didn't. But yeah.
And without giving the game away, have you got any other cricketing subjects that are floating around as conceptual ideas at this stage?
Well, I would love to tell. I would love to do a play about Botham and Boycott. I mean, that just intrigues me. That relationship. And they played together, obviously. And I think there is something there. Sheila Berry and I actually wrote a radio play which was based on Ian Botham's experience in the West Indies when he was a younger man, which the BBC didn't want because I think they thought might get sued. But that's another story. But no, I think yeah, I'd like to do something where there's a real clash of stories, of personalities, the polar opposite attitudes to life and living.
You could start with when both of them ran him out because he was scoring so slowly. I think about in the late 70s sometime, wasn't it? I think,
Absolutely, and Dennis Amiss had a tricky moment when he ran him out at Lords, and Ray Illingworth was the captain, had to intervene after because Boycott was going to take revenge. So yes,
well, he wasn't exactly blameless, was he? But on a number of occasions, I
no, no,
suspect.
no, I'm sure, not one of his greatest skills running between the wickets.
I'd love to carry the conversation on, James, but we've done an hour and a bit, and that some of the comments have been coming in here. So, if I may, so first of all, thank you very much for doing the interview, and there's a little bit more to come, but there's some fascinating comments here, but a few questions as well. Sudhir Junica says the Bollywood film Lagan, released around 2000, has a more realistic representation because they used English club cricketers as extras. I didn't know that. That was a
No,
bit.
I didn't. I didn't.
Um, Now, the next two are sort of combined, really. Richard Evans asks where you took the nom de plume Dougie Blaxland from, and then Nicholas Evanson said, "I couldn't help notice the name Blaxland. It brings me back wonderful memories of working as a volunteer at the Sydney Olympics. I stayed for a week after the games at Blaxland in the Blue Mountains." So, any connection with Australia?
Yes, yes. My grandfather's name was Alan Blaxland, and my great grandfather was Gregory Blaxland, who was the pioneer who, along with Wentworth and Lawson, found the way through the Blue Mountains to open up the Great Interior in Australia. So Blaxland Town is named after one of my ancestors, and yeah, so and the Blue Mountains. So they follow goats. Actually, they found the pathway through by following goats. So there's a museum to my great grandfather there. So yeah, so that part. And Dougie comes from my father-in-law, who was a coal miner in Derbyshire. So completely different. So yeah, and I took a nom de plume because I started writing when I was a head teacher, and I wanted to be able to write about the things I wanted to write about, and not feel constrained in any way by being part of you're part of the establishment. So that's why I took nom de plume. So yeah. So the answer is yes, Blaxland. I've been there, and have a fridge magnet with it on, and been to the museum.
Very good. What an interesting story, and well done, Nicholas, for raising that. I'd never have thought that it might have a connection to Australia and the Blue Mountains, but there you go.
There you go.
So, do you ever get confused? Do people call you Dougie sometimes, or yeah,
Yeah, they do.
yeah, yeah,
My
yeah,
agent, who knows I'm James, always calls me Dougie. So,
yeah.
and it kind of in the theatre world, it kind of varies, but yeah, mostly I'm known as Dougie there, and that's fine. That's fine. I'm
Very
used
good.
to it now.
So what I think I might do, if it's all right, if you've got a minute or two left, there's no more things come up on the chat, but if anyone wants to put them on there, please do. Is there anyone that would like to ask James a question or perhaps comment on some of the things he's talked about? I know there's a lot of Colin Milburn fans out there, and probably a lot of Chris Lewis fans and Dennis Amiss for that matter. But let's just see if anyone wants to come in. Just mute and speak, I think, is probably the easiest way to do it. I think that's a silence that suggests you've covered every base already, James. So
I
uh,
bored everybody to tears. So
not
what?
at all. You've been, the evocation of all the aspects of your career. It was absolutely fascinating hearing about playing for Kent and Derbyshire and telling us about the personalities and the challenges of being a professional cricketer. You're,
Peter, I would like to ask a question,
oh,
if I may.
here's
Martin,
Martin. Yes, of course you can.
Dougie, fascinating talk. I can't tell you. You were very well received by my friends at the Dorset Cricket Society.
Oh,
And I
right.
have to say, I can understand why they were so fulsome in their praise for you. So that's the first point. But more importantly, I chair the Speakers Working Party at Sussex County Cricket Club. We had Jeff Miller speaking last year, and he was absolutely brilliant. But I heard no mention, I have heard no mention of Mike Hendrick. I mean, God bless him. Is he still alive? And does he do those sorts of things?
No, Mike Hendrick died.
Oh,
Yeah, he died age 72. I think it's two possibly 3 years ago.
uh,
Um, and his last comment, his last interview, he had bowel cancer, very very sadly, and he was at stage 3 to 4 by the time it was diagnosed. But typically Hendo, his last interview, he said, "Oh, no, no, no." He said, "I'm done now. I'm in the departure lounge," and that was Hendo. But he was a great, a wonderful man, and a remarkable bowler, a
yeah.
remarkable a remarkable bowler. I think you find Barry Richards was the guy he used to do. Well, he's probably in my day probably the best opening batsman in the world, and Hendo used to do him for a pastime. Wonderful bowler and a lovely man. Yeah.
Can you remember any particular jokes of the old men watching cricket? Can you recount any of those at all? Or
No, not specifically. They used to, and they talk nonsense. So the language that they invented was a kind of Derbyshire version of Stanley Unwin stroke Kenneth Williams, and they talked this total nonsense that somehow made the words were kind of invented. 30 words like the 30 blokes and a bit washed down the roaders and the Saturdays and it just rolled on. But there was vague sort of similarities to proper language. Very, very clever, very funny man.
well, Jeff Miller is still a fantastic speaker, I have to say. So
No,
thank you very much for that feedback.
no, my pleasure, my pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks, Martin. Well, as we've been chatting, we're going to keep you for a little longer because there's a couple more that have come in. This is quite a wide-ranging question, but Basil says, "What's happened to county cricket?"
Well, yeah, I mean the huge changes from when I was playing, when we played each other twice, home and away, and the the death of the 4 day game, I think, is going to be to the detriment of Test cricket in the longer term, and it's financially driven almost entirely, and the question is it inevitable? And I suppose the answer to that is only if the powers that be are not prepared to put the money behind it to support it. But our days of subsidising sport or subsidising anything seem to be very limited. It seems to be where we're going. And if you think of what's happening in government terms to subsidies of I don't know, the water industry or the railways or the post office or what have you, we are where we are with so many of our what were former national institutions, because there is no money and investment in them, and county cricket is where it is, I think, purely and simply for financial reasons. I think it's a real shame. I think county cricket. I have very happy memories of those lovely my day 3 day games. Journeys from Folkestone to Scarborough overnight were much fun, mind you.
Tony has said, "Were you in the same school cricket team as Chris Tavares?" And he then said, "How did that work out?" Which might mean, did Chris Tavares bat very slowly then?
Yes, I was in the same. I was captain of the side in '70, and Chris, that was his first season. He's a little bit younger than me, and playing in the under 15s over the field was Paul Downton. So we had a yeah. So and that my 1970 cricket team also included one Tim Lawrence, who's now married to Princess Anne. So Chris was reminded me as a young player. I mean, you have a look at his school record if you go through it. I mean, he scored 1,000 runs, I think, in his last year at school. I went to watch him play. He's a dear friend, and I went to watch him play his first game. I saw him get his first 100 when he was at Oxford against Northampton, and Cottam and Dye and Hodgson, and he smashed them to all parts of the parks. He was the free scoring player who Alan Hurd, who was the coach at Sevenoaks School, who played for Essex and Cambridge, said he reminded him of E.R. Dexter. And you find that really, really difficult to believe, of the England number 3 who held the fort while both of them smashed the Australians to all parts. But Botham makes the point in his book, I think, that Tavare up the other end was provided the anchorage that enabled players like him to play freely. And Derek Randall says the same thing. But Tav played that way for England because England's number 3s came and went at phenomenal rate. We could not find a number 3. I don't think we've got one now either. Bring back Tavare. That's my. Yeah,
very good.
No, he didn't play like that. It wasn't his natural game.
No, he was obviously a very successful cricketer for many years, wasn't he? He was unfairly pilloried, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, and a brilliant captain. Derek Underwood always said that other than Brearley, he was the best captain he played under at Kent. And of course, he was replaced by C.S. Cowdrey, Christopher Cowdrey. Not Chris Cowdrey's fault. Chris is a lovely guy. But there you are. These things happen.
They do. I think the final question, unless other people have still want to chip in, they're welcome to do that. Richard Evans is actually asking more about football. He says, have the Laurie Cunningham and the 3 Degrees plays been aired in West Bromwich?
Yeah, well, we did them at the Midland Arts Centre in Birmingham, which is as close to West Bromwich as we got, and we had Cyril Regis had just died actually. But Brendan Batson came, and Cyril's family and Laurie Cunningham's family came to watch that. It was a very, very powerful moment to meet them all, or to have them all together. I'd met them all and talked to them all individually, but to have them all together was wonderful. We had it was packed with West Brom fans, not least Adrian Childs from Radio 5 Live was there, who took part in a post-show discussion because he was. I'm probably packed because Adrian Charles actually talked about it endlessly on his Friday show the night before it opened at the Mac. Yeah, but West Brom actually were incredibly supportive of our production and put it out in their programs for weeks before. So that was that was a real joy being involved in that story. Really real joy.
Well, James, I think we've done an hour and a quarter as promised. Thank you so much for being such a good guest and telling us some fascinating stories in a very eloquent way. You've had a very interesting life. I'm sure there's a lot more to come, and we wish you well with whatever you've got up your sleeve next. And hopefully there will be a cricket play to come. But the rate you churn these plays out and to such a high standard, you must have a very good work ethic and a determination, an ability to get information out of people as well. So congratulations on those plays about Chris Lewis and Colin Milburn. They really were powerful pieces of work. I think we'd all agree with that. So thanks again, and thank you everyone else for attending. I hope you've enjoyed that. There is a recording of this, James, that goes onto the Cricket Society website, which is for members only. I hope that's all right. And I'm sure a number of people will now want to listen to it probably again, and also those that haven't will be recommending that they jolly well do.
Peter, thank you very much for your wonderful questions, and thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Good night. All the best, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye. There we are.